Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode, a post-trade deadline edition of the Raw Prospect Podcast. I'm your host, Emmy Nixon, and today we're going to be placing our top 4 MLB teams in each conference, and we're going to be putting them onto a confidence meter from 1 to 10, basically having an open conversation about each team that we've selected. Each team we've selected, we've gone through and decided who we think either is in a intriguing team to talk about or has a legitimate shot to win it all this season. But before we get into all of that, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button down below if you don't want your team to have eternal bad luck. Just kidding. Not really. And also, we're also available wherever you get your podcasts on all podcasting platforms. So if you're not able to finish the entire episode over here, head over there and finish it on audio and leave a 5-star rating and review over there. But now joining me from Houston, Texas, the Stat King himself, Mr. Michael Ween. How you doing?
How is everyone doing? I had a fantastic day for many reasons. One of which we might talk about at the very end of the show. And you can kind of get a hint if you tuned into my episode of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports yesterday evening, where I talked about that particular subject that I'm very now excited about. Not going too crazy because things can change, but as of right now, and probably for the next month or two, I'm very excited about where things are heading with that particular subject. Today, we haven't done a baseball episode in a long time. Not since, I don't think, before the All-Star break. Like, it was before the All-Star break, I think was our last baseball episode. So it's been at least a month. We're doing our monthly check-in like we promised at the start of the season. It's our August post-trade deadline stock exchange. We're going to be putting each team on a confidence meter from 1 to 10. We've hand-selected 8 teams, and all 8 teams were in some way involved at the trade deadline, whether they were buying players, made big moves, made smaller moves to improve, or possibly just, none of these teams sold per se, but didn't really do much. They just kept status quo. So with all that being said, like and subscribe. Let's hop in.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's get this discussion
Okay, so
going. Who is our first team?
Our first team, we're going to be touching on over to the NL side of things. Our first team is going to be the Chicago Cubs. Let me get the lower third up. There we go. Now, I'll start with you, Michael. What is your overall feeling on the Chicago Cubbies this season and their recent surge? It's been pretty impressive.
Yeah, the Cubs are playing good baseball right now, and they have been ever since they've been playing above 500 baseball since the All-Star break and really have ramped up recently. And it was good timing because they started to really get hot right before the trade deadline, where they were sort of in that gray area where they had to make a quick decision on whether or not to sell at the deadline or to, do what they did, which was, I think, get a little better, but not go too, like all in, like maybe some other teams that tried that, but it hasn't quite worked out so well. I think the Cubs have put themselves in a good position. The surge came at a good time because it allowed them to keep their premier players who have been performing at a really high level this year, including Cody Bellinger, who is a former National League MVP and has been excellent this season. He's been their best player, coveted left-handed bat at the trade deadline. Their surge allowed the Cubs to keep the other players in the fold. Their pitching has been good lately. They just won a weekend series over arguably the best team in baseball and definitely the favorite in the National League, in my opinion, the Atlanta Braves. Before that, they won a series against the Reds. I believe they swept them and scored a lot of runs in those series. Seiya Suzuki has been hitting for them as well. Their pitching hasn't been bad. Right now, I don't know exactly how many games back they are of the Brewers, I think, in the NL Central, in the Reds, but it's not far back. They have put themselves in good position to try, if they continue at this rate, to go and grab potentially a wild card spot or at least be in the conversation for that. Cody Bellinger has been absolutely fantastic. I think he might not be a MVP finalist in the National League this season because there are other players that I think are more worthy of that discussion right now, including Ronald Acuna Jr. being the obvious one from the Atlanta Braves. But in any other season, he would be right up there. He's had that good of a year. I do think he'll maybe get a couple votes. I think he warrants that consideration. But this team has been playing really well. And as of right now, where things stand, as they've been playing really good baseball for about a month now, I put my confidence meter at about a 6.5, 7 that they go and potentially make the playoffs.
Yeah, I think they're definitely the best team in their division at the moment. I think it's only a matter of time before they catch up to the Milwaukee Brewers. They're only 2.5 games back, only a half game back of the wild card spot as of right now. Currently, a few games left to be played, like at 9 o'clock on August 10th here. But nevertheless, they're sitting right there in the thick of things. And if you asked me in June whether they'd be still around in the picture, I probably would have said no. Um, this is a team that it was looking like they were going to have to sell at the deadline, but it's as you said, it was great news that they got hot at the right time, and now that you've had experience winning, now you can look to gain playoff experience for some of your young guys.
And how could I forget to mention their decently big trade deadline addition? Jamar Candelario, who they acquired, the first baseman slash third baseman switch hitter from the Washington Nationals, who's having an absolutely fantastic season. The perfect piece. Like, if you were to ask me what the perfect piece would have been for the Cubs to go out and get at the trade deadline, that was low cost, but a really good player that fits their lineup, gives them more balance within their lineup, can slot in pretty much anywhere in the lineup and get production from, it would have been Jamar Candelario, who, of the guys that were readily made available at the deadline, he was the go get for the Cubs, and they got him. And look, in his first couple games in a Cubs uniform, that first week, he hit 571 and had a 1.54 OPS. The Cubs, as I mentioned, they swept the Reds. It wasn't even close. The Reds have been struggling, of course, but yeah, that streak came at a perfect time, and Candelario is the perfect piece for their lineup. He's a switch hitter. He brings the lumber, can hit for some power. He's definitely a plus defender at both corner infield spots, which are so important, especially third base. And he's a good rental bat for a low cost. And that's exactly what the Cubs wanted. Because right now, I don't think you would say that they're in the tier of maybe the Dodgers nor the Braves, but they're just looking for some help that can get them potentially into October. And as we've seen in the past, and I'm not saying that this Cubs team is poised to make a run in October yet. I'm not going that far yet. But once you get there, I mean, anything can
Yeah.
really happen. So that's what their goal was, and they accomplished it. I give them an A+ for the trade deadline and an A+ for how they've been playing the past month.
Yeah. And I mean, they really look like a team that could be spending a lot in free agency come this offseason. I mean, they've positioned themselves with a perennial MVP candidate like Cody Bellinger, a solid rotation, and a pretty balanced lineup for the most part. And you have some young guys there as well. They're in a really, really good spot. And they got to close this out still. They got to make it into the playoffs. But no matter the case, no matter what happens now, it's been a successful year for the Cubs, which is always good.
Yeah. And the last note that I'll make on the Cubs from a Cubs perspective is that when you really look at what this year's trade deadline was, it was heavy on the pitcher side. Like, it was a strong pitcher's market. And we saw that with a bunch of the movement that went on. But it wasn't a very good, deep hitter's market. And there were a couple guys out there, including Cody Bellinger at one point. But of the guys that eventually were on the table, the Cubs got one of the best, if not the best, guy to be traded offensively. And that's impressive. So that's the last thing I'll say about that. Who's our next team?
We're going to head over to the AL now. We're going to cover the Toronto Blue Jays. I'll start off for the Blue Jays. I think their pitching staff has turned a corner a little bit. They've been able to win games now. They're hitting well, and it seems like they've found a good rhythm in their season. Now it's all about getting hot at the right time. Now it's time to ramp things up, and this year the talent needs to show itself in the playoffs. Last year things ended really brutally, to say the least, and all those guys on that team still remember it, and now they gotta redeem themselves. I'm not gonna be counting them out by any stretch, and they're sitting pretty right now. They're 4 games into the wild card, so they have 4 games of buffer to play with, to still be in the wild card position. So not a bad spot to be, considering they're in arguably the toughest division in baseball.
Yeah, it was a sort of a rough beginning for the Blue Jays. And it got worse in June, July due to the struggles of one Alek Manoah, who was a Cy Young finalist last year, I believe. Or if not, he was in like the top 5, finishing the top 5 in voting. Had a really, really good season. There were high expectations for him to be the ace of this Toronto staff coming into this year. And for whatever reason, and this happens in baseball sometimes to the best of them, he hit a wall and just was absolutely awful for a span of about a month, and eventually got sent down to the Toronto minor league system for a while before he was eventually brought back up. I don't really know how he's been doing since then, but it seems like when you look at this Toronto rotation, ever since the All-Star break, things have started to round into form. And this rotation looks like the rotation that we kind of expected it to be coming into the season. Since the All-Star break, can you guess which team leads MLB in starter ERA? Yes, that would be the Toronto Blue Jays. 3.27 ERA since the All-Star break. That's the best in the big leagues. Yeah, it's been impressive. Pitching had to turn a corner because before the All-Star break, it was what was holding them back for the most part. And it has. Now, can that continue for the next couple months? I think it can. You look at Hyun-Jin Ryu, one of their best pitchers. He's been rounding into form. He's just come off the IL, but he looks really good. Kevin Gausman, who was a guy they acquired, I think, before last year. as that number two to Alek Manoah. He's sort of been their number one in place of Alek Manoah during his struggles. Starting pitching's really good. I think they have 3 or 4 guys that if they get in to like a wild card series, you can feel really good about. Now, I still need to see more from Alek Manoah down the stretch. He really needs to get right. I'm not sure if they can go as far as they want if they don't have the good version of Alek Manoah. But ever since the trade deadline, the starting staff has given me a lot of confidence that not only will Toronto be in the playoffs, but it might not. I think they can make noise. And when they get there, they really need to, because you think about what happened last year, high expectations, played good down the stretch, got themselves in, and then they ran into the Mariners, and we saw what happened in that series. They got swept. So I'm not I'm not over the moon confident right now, because I need to see more from Alek Manoah. But they improved their bullpen at the trade deadline, getting Jordan Hicks, the flamethrower from the Cardinals. He'll pair with Jordan Romano in the back end of that bullpen, which is an area that they needed to address, and they did. And their offense speaks for itself. Bo Bichette, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. The list goes on, right? So Whit Merrifield's been playing well. I think this Blue Jays team is legit. I think they have a chance to make noise in the playoffs. Right now, my confidence meter is probably about a 7.5 that they get into the playoffs, win a wild card series, and we'll see where it goes from there. The reason it's not higher is because of the aforementioned Alek Manoah and his struggles.
Yeah, I'm right around a 7.5 as well. I think their best case scenario is probably winning the AL and pushing someone in the NL to. I could see them pushing someone in the NL to 6-7 games, but I'm not sure if they can find enough consistency uh, to really win it all this year. I could be wrong on that, but they have the star power, and what we've learned the last couple years, and really just in general in baseball, is star power matters. And when they show up, the whole team responds to that. And if you have a couple of ace pitchers in your rotation, then that might be all you need to get by.
Yeah, that's really all we need to say there. Who is our next team?
Our next team is going to be the Philadelphia Phillies.
Man, the
Yeah.
Phillies, coming off a high of last night when Michael Lorenzen, who I believe they acquired at the trade deadline, yes, they did, right-handed starter from the Detroit Tigers, threw a no-hitter against, I think it was, gosh, I can't remember who it was against, but he did throw a no-hitter last night in one of his first starts for the Phillies. Yeah, I mean, they did a decent job at the trade deadline. They've been playing really good baseball here for the past 50 or so games. They're 11 games above 500, sitting pretty in a really tough division. One of the bugaboos for this Philly season has been not only waiting for, to get Bryce Harper back in the lineup, as now we've seen he's back and in pretty good form, playing first base, I believe. But Trey Turner, the star, one of the stars of the World Baseball Classic for the USA team back in, I think that was March-ish. We all remember that. That was a fun to watch little tournament there. That will again happen in, I think, 2 or 3 years once again. And it finished with the epic Trout Otani at bat. Excuse me. That was so fun to watch. He was a star of that tournament, and I think it got people really excited about what Trey Turner was going to do this season. As we all know, Trey Turner is a fantastic player, regardless of what he did in the World Baseball Classic. We already knew he was really, really, really good. That's why he got the contract that he did from the Philadelphia Phillies. But one of the bugaboos was, for whatever reason, he was in a slump for like the first 2.5 months of the season. He was not performing up to the Trey Turner standard. And recently, he's turned his season around. He went just recently, he had a streak where he went 7 for 19, 4 doubles and a home run, and it's looked more like the Trey Turner that we all know. Look, they haven't been scoring a ton of runs. Their offense has been sort of inconsistent. They're 8th in the National League in runs scored, and they just lost one of their better hitters, who I think hits at the top of that lineup, Brandon Marsh, who was really good in their World Series run. They've lost him for about 2 to 3 weeks, but they got Michael Lorenzen. They've gotten pretty good pitching. Nick Castellanos, had a very good first half and hopefully can continue that. Bryce Harper, we all know when the lights are brightest, he's going to shine. He's already proven that time and time again. They have a lot of offense. Kyle Schwarber is one of their big guys, right smack dab in the middle of that lineup. We know they're capable of making a run. I like their team, but right now, I'd say my confidence level is about a 7-ish. I don't love that they've lost Brandon Marsh for an extended period of time, but they've dealt with injuries this year fairly well, and they've put themselves in a pretty good position. I'm going to say 7, but that confidence continues to rise, seeing Michael Lorenzen and how he's performed through his first couple starts in a Phillies uniform.
Yeah, I think the no-hitter is significant in a lot of different ways. Obviously, Michael Lorenzen was dealing, and he deserves all the credit, of course. But one of the things we had talked a lot about with the Phillies last season going into the playoffs was their struggles with their defense. A lot of errors, a lot of miscues, a lot of miscommunications. And to now be a year later and having one of your pitchers throw a no-hitter, I mean, a no-hitter is obviously it's a pitching accomplishment, but it's a full team effort. You have to have the trust in that defense to hold their own, to be able to throw the pitches you want to throw and be aggressive and attack the strike zone. So, I mean, the defense has been much better, and I think the confidence is high for me. I think the star power is there, and having the experience matters so much to me. They know how to win, and I feel extremely confident that they'll be right there in the NLCS against the Braves. So I'm going to say my confidence meter is at an 8, because as of right now, I think you get Marsh back by the time the playoffs come around, and hopefully he'll be back into form by then. And then once you get into a series with the Braves, I mean, it's game on. I feel like they match up pretty well. Obviously, you can't count out the Dodgers, who we'll talk about a little bit later, but I think the Phillies are right there and can beat anyone in the league.
All right. Well, with that being said, let's move on to our fourth team of this conversation. And before we do that, I'm almost right there with you. But I need to see a little more. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and move on to our next team. Oh boy.
Yep.
The Houston Astros. How about you start with this one? Where are you at with Houston? By the way, they just beat the Orioles 2 out of 3. And we're going to talk about the Orioles at the end of the episode. Where do you stand with Houston as they are battling the Texas Rangers for positioning in their division?
Yeah, it feels like the standings in that AL West is really yo-yoing right now between the Astros and the Rangers. The Rangers, I think, I think the Astros had gotten as close as 2 games back of the Rangers at one point. And then the Rangers rattle off 8 straight, and now it's back up to 4.5 games, I believe, which is still doable, but it's a little bit of a cushion there, especially with a lot of the series they played against each other in the rearview mirror now. Um, the thing with the Astros is it's a story we've all seen before. This team is experienced, and one thing that this season has proved is they just know how to win. Dusty Baker is one of the best managers in football. Baseball, as we all know. He doesn't coach football. Yeah, sorry. One of the best managers in baseball, as we all know. And I mean, to just scratch and claw the wins they needed to stay afloat. Well, Altuve, Alvarez, Tucker missed time. Um, I believe Bregman was really their only mainstay guy who really has been healthy the entire year. And even he's had his struggles at some points in time throughout the year. So having all of those guys back in the lineup, I mean, they're as dangerous as ever. Now with Verlander back, and hopefully they can get their pitching all together and hot at the same time. That's what it all comes down to. But I'm confident they will. They've done it year after year after year.
I'm going to come out and say it right now. And I've been actually following the Astros pretty closely since it's kind of hard to avoid now that I'm in Houston. Until proven otherwise, the Houston Astros should be the favorite definitively in the American League. They've done it, as you said, they've done it before. When their team's fully healthy, they're winning games at a very high clip, right up there with the Orioles. As you see, I mean, they just took them down in a series at Camden Yards. They know what they have. Dusty Baker's been there, done that. They've sort of gotten over themselves. They've kind of gotten past everything that's happened in the past with whatever it was that they did back in 2017. And look, they weren't let's acknowledge, let's be fair here. They were not the only team that was engaging in some kind of illegal activity. Now, theirs was brought to the forefront because it was a little more involved than those other teams, and they ended up winning the World Series. Like, it directly helped them win the World Series. But other teams were doing the same crap. So let's be fair to the Astros here. That has to be acknowledged. But look, I think they got to be the definitive favorite. They're playing really well. Altuve's come back and he's hot. Altuve is hot. Alvarez, of course, is dangerous anytime he comes to the plate. We saw what he did in Game 6 last year to take the lead in that World Series and put the nail in the coffin for the Astros in that World Series. You look at this lineup. I mean, where do you get a break if you're a pitcher? Altuve, Bregman, Alvarez, Kyle Tucker. Let's just talk about Kyle Tucker for a minute.
Yep.
In a world where Shohei Ohtani does not exist, I'm telling you right now, Kyle Tucker would be, if not first, probably second in MVP voting. He's been that good. He's been one of the best hitters in the American League. I had the stats up coming into today. Over his last 50 games, he's hitting .330 with a .416 on base percentage and a 618 slugging percentage. Over 162 game season, that's a pace for 200 hits, 41 home runs, and 152 RBIs. That's a damn good MVP type caliber season. He's been their most consistent hitter, start to finish. And I think he's going to get some legitimate MVP votes. He's their cleanup hitter. I mean, are you kidding me? They can put him in the cleanup hole. They could put Alvarez there. I think even Bregman could be that guy. Now, of course, they're going to bat Altuve leadoff because that's what they've done and that's what they've thrived off. He's like the setup guy. And then you go to the second half of their lineup, and it doesn't stop. Yenier Diaz, the right-handed bat, the DH, the young kid who they traded for from Cleveland. He's been a contributor this year. He's played really well. Jose Abreu, who's a former MVP for that matter, is batting in the 6 hole. Chas McCormick, their center fielder, really, really good season so far for him. Jeremy Pena, the MVP of last year's World Series. Although he's sort of been slumping lately, and that's been the one bugaboo, we've seen it. He performs when it matters the most. And Martin Maldonado, although he doesn't hit, he's a leader, and he has some pop. Like if he can run into one every once in a while. And then you look at what they have from a pitching perspective. Valdez, Javier, who just came back, Hunter Brown, who they drafted in the 5th round back in 2019. I believe he's in his rookie year. He's really been good this year. And then they bring back Verlander along with JP France, Jose Urquidy. I mean, that rotation goes 6 deep. And then you have one of the best bullpens in baseball with a guy they added at the trade deadline, Kendall Graveman, one of the Chicago White Sox's better relievers, one of the better relievers in the AL, with Ryan Stanek and Ryan Presley and Hector Neris and Brian Abreu. The Astros are once again stacked, and in my opinion, until proven otherwise, kind of like what we've seen in the past with the Golden State Warriors, they should be the favorites in the American League. My confidence level right now is probably around an 8.5, that they will not only be actually a 9, that they're going to be in the ALCS once again.
Yeah,
as long as Alvarez and the rest of their stars are healthy.
Yeah, exactly. Health is going to be huge. Absolutely. This is probably going to open up some wounds for you as a Yankees fan, but I would argue the only pitching staff in the AL that would have had a shot at taming that lineup would have been the Yankees, and unfortunately, they can't hit. So, I mean, this Astros team, it's looking good for them. They're going to be tough to beat. Absolutely, they're the favorite.
Yep. We'll talk about the Yankees another time. We don't have time for that right now.
Sorry to bring that up. Okay. Now our second to last team, or not second to last team. We got 4 more teams to go. I'm stupid. Let's talk Dodgers, a team that's been overlooked a little bit. They lost a couple stars over the offseason, but they're still there. They're still hanging around. They're still playing good baseball. What do you think about the Dodgers?
Man, the Dodgers have been an interesting team this year. And look, the past month or two, they've been playing as well as anybody. Look, Kershaw once again continues to do it. They, of course, own the Padres. They've beaten the Padres 8 times in 9 games. Now, the Padres are a mess in themselves. Like, they are what I would call this year the NL's version of what is the Yankees now in the American League. Very talented teams that have invested a bunch of resources into their team, but for whatever reason just can't get their shit together this season. Like, those teams are very similar. But the Dodgers, they took 3 out of 4 in San Diego this past weekend. They've won 31 of their last 38 games coming into today. And they're again one of those teams that, like the Houston Astros, have that experience come playoff time. Now, it might not be the most stacked Dodgers lineup that you've ever seen, but Mookie Betts continues to be fantastic. Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, 1-2. Like, there's not a whole lot of 1-2 punches that I can think of that are better than that. They set it up. Then you have Will Smith, who's been really good at the catcher position for them, Max Muncy, and JD Martinez. I mean, that's a really good 1-5. I think the key for the Dodgers is, number one, the success of and the consistency of JD Martinez in the middle of their lineup. Max Muncy, JD Martinez are like X factors in the middle of their lineup. And then Miguel Rose right now, James and Hayward are going to be the guys that are key in getting on base, setting up, say, a Mookie Betts or a Freddie Freeman for those run scoring opportunities. But hey, it's working right now. I like their pitching staff. They went out and got Lance Lynn from the White Sox, who were obvious sellers at the deadline, to strengthen this rotation, along with Kershaw and Julio Urias, who's been a big-time playoff performer. I have some questions about their bullpen. It's been up and down throughout the season. They also acquired Joe Kelly from the White Sox in that deal where they brought over Lance Lynn. So they've made some investments in their pitching, which I like. I still have some questions about their bullpen in the middle to bottom of that lineup. But the Dodgers will be right there in the end. I think right now I'm going to probably end up giving the Dodgers the benefit of the doubt in the end. Last year, obviously, I think they're highly motivated after what happened last year. And I think I'm at about an 8-ish that they will be, if not in the NLCS, they will get very close to that point. It just depends on matchups really in the postseason and what their path looks like.
Yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Who do you think the Dodgers match up better with between the Phillies and the Braves? I'm interested to see. It's hard to say.
It's hard to say. I can't really answer that question right now. But what I can tell you is, if I'm the Dodgers, I'd much rather play the Phillies than the Braves. I don't think you want anything to do with that Braves team right now.
The interesting part of the NL to me is one side of the bracket, you're going to have a little bit of a weaker side, and then they're going to have an other side where two of those three teams are going to have to play each other in the divisional series. So the hope is for the team that's on the other side that they kill each other and then get to the NLCS super beat up. But
look, obviously, I mean,
see.
anything can happen come the playoff. We'll talk about the
Right.
specific matchups more in depth as we get closer. But right now, the Dodgers have set themselves up well after, for Dodgers standard, a subpar start. I think they were hanging around the 500 mark for a while, maybe a little above that. They were about, I don't know, between 5 and 10 games above 500, but they've really taken off in the past 2 months. They're on a hot streak, and right now I wouldn't want to see them because I think they're intrinsically motivated after what happened last year. And they have two MVP caliber players at the top of that lineup, both of which have been in multiple World Series and have won World Series rings. So, yeah, I like the Dodgers. I'm not overly excited for their World Series hopes, considering some other dangerous teams in the National League right now, but they'll be right there in the end.
Yep, definitely. Okay. Now let's move over to the Texas Rangers.
Yeah, let's hear your thoughts first on the Texas Rangers, who right now lead the Astros in the AOS, as we mentioned earlier, but the Astros have been creeping up on them.
Yeah, I mean, they've been on fire in terms of hitting all season long. That's really been the juice to this whole thing. Their pitching has been good. It's been good for the most part. But really, the engine of this whole thing is that lineup has just been on a tear for multiple tears throughout the season. They've had obviously their few games here and there where they go cold, but most of this season they've just been untouchable. Corey Seager has been fantastic. I mean, if Shohei didn't exist, obviously he does, but if he didn't, he would be right there in the MVP slot, in my opinion. And in terms of their playoff aspirations, in terms of their hopes for a World Series, I'm not sure what to think. They have a lot of guys who have been extremely consistent all season. It's just whether or not they're in that right headspace, they get the right matchup in the playoffs to where they can be in rhythm and be confident enough. Because obviously, experience matters a lot, but there's also a certain luck to it as well. You got to just be hot at the right time. That's really all there is to it.
Yeah, I really like the Rangers. I think they're dangerous. I think would be the best way to put it. If you look
Yeah.
at what they've done this year, you know, pretty consistently, you look at their profile, they're second in batting average. So they get on base. They're second in on base percentage. They're second in OPS. So they hit for power consistently. They're first in runs scored. They've been the best offense in the league for the most part all season long. They're fifth in home runs. And they have some speed and not a whole lot, but they can muck it up on the bases every now and then. Very, very elite offensive profile. And as far as starting pitching goes, like it's been really good, and that's been in large part due to Nathan Eovaldi, who they signed in free agency, uh, and some other guys in that rotation who I'll mention right now: John Gray, Andrew Heaney, who was an offseason pickup coming over from the Dodgers, who kind of recuperated himself with the Dodgers before ultimately getting a bigger deal this offseason. And now you look at what they did at the deadline, going out, being aggressive like they have been the past 2 years, and getting not only one, but two starters at the deadline to strengthen this rotation and put it up there with, say, maybe not like at an Astros level, but it's up there now with the best rotations in the league, I would say. I mean, they have a rotation that I think you are comfortable with, and Rangers fans are comfortable with going into the postseason. It's a lot stronger than it was before the trade deadline. Acquiring Jordan Montgomery, who's been a really solid starter for the Cardinals, and was a solid starter for years in New York. Um, I know that almost better than anybody. And then Max Scherzer, who has had sort of a rough season for Max Scherzer standards. But I think the change of scenery, of course, is going to help him like it did when he got traded a couple of years back to the Dodgers and helped them, on their way to the World Series. So I look at this Rangers team. They hit, they pitch. Their pitching just got better. They actually did make a couple moves in their bullpen. They traded for Chris Stratton from St. Louis. They actually traded for Aroldis Chapman and Will Smith, who they signed as a free agent from Houston this past offseason. He's been good for them as well. Um, I like this Rangers team. I don't think they're on the level of the Astros or maybe even the Rays come postseason time, but they're right there. I look at the Rays; they've been there, done that. I look at the Astros; they've been there, done that. The Rangers look like they're heading there, but they still have to prove it.
Definitely. Yeah, they still have a lot to prove for sure. Okay. Let's keep it in the AL and let's head over to Baltimore for the number one team in the AL, the Baltimore Orioles. If you told me that 3 years ago, that we'd be sitting here in August 2023 with Baltimore sitting at the top of the AL, I would have laughed at you.
Well, everyone would have laughed at everybody if that was the conversation 3 years ago. Um, Look, gotta give credit where credit is due. And I think I'll go as far as to say that I think Baltimore is on the same tier as the Astros this year. I know that seems outrageous to say to some, but you watch this team, they are legit. And I don't think they're going anywhere in the next month and a half before the playoffs start. You look at what they've done. I know they just lost a series to the Astros, but they had a lead in some of those games, and Kyle Tucker hit the grand slam. They got a little taste of what not only my Yankees have experienced in the past when facing the Astros, but other teams have experienced as well. I mean, the Astros, that's just what they do. They've been in those types of games. They win those types of games. They typically find a way with clutch hitting and so forth. And the Orioles got Astroed, as I would say, a couple nights ago. But the Orioles, you watch that series, and they were competitive. In that same game where Kyle Tucker hit the game-winning grand slam off Jose Bautista, or Felix Bautista, I think is his name. I'm confusing Jose Bautista, the guy who knocked out who was it?
The Rangers. He had that crazy bat flip.
Yeah, Rougned Odor.
Yeah.
They got in the fight, and it sort of brings us back to what just happened in baseball with Jose Ramirez and Tim Anderson getting into a fight.
Yeah.
Sort of not exactly the same situation, but sort of.
Both
fights took place on a slide into second base, but they were happening for different reasons, obviously. This Baltimore team, in that same game that Tucker hit that grand slam, they were up at 6-2 at one point. And today they won the game with a game-winning hit against the Astros, a walk-off. Like, I think they can compete. I think they're that good. And it's crazy to say, but it's rare that all of this young talent comes up and starts to immediately figure it out. But look, it's not only this season. It's since like around this time last year when the Orioles brought up their top prospect, Adley Rutschman, the catcher, that they have actually been, if not the best team in the American League since late last year, like the second best team in the American League since late last year. Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, Anthony Santander, who's actually one of the elder statesmen on this Orioles team, but is not really old. He's just been there for longer than most of these guys. Ryan Mountcastle, Ryan O'Hearn, Adam Frazier, Austin Hayes. All these guys are hitting. And when you look at what they've done, to improve their pitching, adding Jack Flaherty, an established guy who's pitched in the playoffs before, Kyle Gibson, who they signed in free agency. The list goes on with a lights-out bullpen for the most part. Like, they've got one of the better bullpens in baseball. I view them on the same, wavelength as I do the Astros right now. And I know that's probably crazy to say to some people, but they check all the boxes except for experience. And that's what I feel like is the common theme with some of these teams that we're talking about. With the different landscape that we're seeing this year in baseball, which is exciting. We like the parity. And I think most casual fans appreciate it because I think most casual fans' perception is, oh, it's going to be the same teams every year. It's going to be, the Dodgers and the Braves and the Yankees and the. It might be most years,
The Yankees.
but look, the Orioles, man, I view them on that same wave. Like, it's crazy to say, but that's where it stands. Bottom line.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. The Orioles, you know, it's always fun to see a young team come out. No matter what sport it is, um, it kind of feels like kind of similar to what the Kings did this past season in the NBA. Not the same thing. Obviously, this team is on their way to the number one overall seed in the conference. But I mean, the talent up and down the roster is just unbelievable, and that fan base is just so ready for. I'm gonna be pulling for the Orioles a little bit. Obviously the Astros are playing, the Rangers are playing. Um, you'd expect someone from Texas to probably root for them, but I mean, this Orioles team, they're fun to watch, man.
Yeah, they're. I don't know. I'd say that they are really fun. They're in the top three. Like if we were doing a league pass rankings, which really doesn't exist for baseball, but if we were doing that, they would be
They would be
in.
right up there.
They'd be right up there.
Yeah.
And 71 and 44 speaks for itself. Um, I don't know if they'll win 100 games. Winning 100 games in a baseball season is really hard to do. But they have a chance. They certainly have a chance. It's in range. It's in their view. Like they can see the possibility of it happening. I don't know that it will, but whether they're the number one overall seed and the playoffs run through Baltimore, or they end up falling off a little bit and they end up somehow in a first round wild card series, which I don't envision happening, but you never know. Um, I think either way, they are World Series contenders.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, not much else we can really say about the Orioles at this point. It's really an unknown whether they'll deliver in the playoffs, and we're just gonna have to wait and see on it. Um, I believe we have one team left to go, and that is who many believe is the best team in baseball, the Atlanta Braves. Um, I mean, what they've been doing this year has been ridiculously dominant. I mean, they're so unbelievably fun to watch. It seemed like Acuna Jr. was kind of coasting a little bit last year. He came back from that injury, and a lot of people had the high expectations, but he's back now, and he's better than he's ever been. And their pitching is fantastic. That lineup, all the way from top to bottom. Oh my goodness! I don't really have much to say other than they're the favorite. Like the conference level should be World Series title or bust.
Yeah, I think for most of this year, I viewed them as the best team in baseball. What are they, 72 and 41? I think that's a game better than the Orioles. I'm not exactly sure, but either way, um, they're going to win their division. Uh, to me, they have the most balanced and best, most productive lineup in baseball. With Acuna Jr. leading the charge, of course, probably going to win NL MVP. Already has, I think, a 30 home run, 50 stolen base season, if I'm not mistaken. And it's probably going to get better than that. Uh, Albies was an all-star at second base. Once again, so was Austin Riley. Matt Olson was an all-star. I mean, they made up most of that National League All-Star team. Like it was the Atlanta Braves All-Star team is basically what it was. And that speaks to the type of season that they're having. Sean Murphy was also on that team at the catcher position, a guy that they traded for back in December from the Oakland Athletics, was one of the better players on the Athletics, and the Athletics got what they could for him. Ozuna, at this point in his career, is just kind of there at the DH position. Like he runs it, he has power still, and he'll run into some home runs. He'll have some big hits, but he's not the same player that he used to be. But he's still productive. I mean, you can have him down there at the bottom of the lineup, and it's totally fine. Rosario, who they got at the trade deadline when they went on their World Series run 2 years ago, has been consistently productive for them in left field. Arcia, the young guy, and Michael Harris, the two young guys, have been fantastic. And if those guys are the guys hitting at the bottom of your lineup, you're looking pretty as far as from an offensive standpoint. You look at their profile offensively, they rank first in the league in average, on-base percentage, OPS, home runs, and they rank second in overall runs scored. Their bullpen's fantastic. They rank first in WHIP, which I think is walks plus hits allowed per inning. So when you see that decimal point, like it says, I don't know, whatever WHIP, that number is the average number of walks and hits they allow per innings pitched. That's what WHIP stands for, just in case you weren't exactly sure. They're third in bullpen ERA, which to some extent really doesn't matter because that can sort of be inflated because of, a bullpen has one bad inning and it significantly inflates the ERA because they pitch less innings in a season than starters do. They don't walk a whole lot of batters. They're fourth in walks per nine. They're sixth in strikeouts per nine. They don't give up home runs. My almost biggest question for this team, and it's not even a question, is what does the starting pitching do come the playoffs? I not that the starting pitching is weak or anything, or that's a weak point, but if you were to choose out of the three aspects of this team, which you would say you're probably the least confident in, I think it's the starting pitching. And I'm still pretty confident that they have a really good starting staff. It's just like Max Fried has had health issues in the past. Bryce Elder is young and really doesn't have much postseason experience. Charlie Morton is getting up there in age, but he continues to perform at a pretty high level. Spencer Strider has had his ups and downs. When he's good, he looks like Cy Young. But when he's not good, it can obviously cause some problems for the Braves. But I think they have the offense and the bullpen and the manager and the experience to get it done. There's just a tad bit of concern of what that rotation is going to look like and or do come the postseason. But they're the Braves, man. They're a well-run organization. They'll figure it out.
Yeah. I'm still gonna say the confidence meter is at a 9.5. I mean, with the consistency they've had all season, and I mean, when Ronald Acuna Jr. is up to the plate, I mean, you talk a lot of times in football with pass rushers, the fear factor. There's a legitimate fear factor with Ronald Acuna Jr. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, he's top 5 player in baseball, maybe top 3.
Yeah.
And he's right up there with, when you talk about the best players in baseball nowadays. I mean, no one touches Shohei, of course, but he's right up there with the guys that you think about: Judge, Alvarez. The list goes on, and Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman. The list goes on and on. I mean, he's up there. So, and he's going to win. I think it would be his first MVP.
Yeah,
maybe his second.
I believe so.
I think it's his first. So, if my pick today for the World Series And this is subject to change once the playoffs start. But if I had to pick the World Series today, and this is how we can sort of wrap up the episode, I'd go Braves Astros, a rematch of what we saw in 2021, I believe.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I'm not going to go on the record right now. I don't know enough. I got to watch a little bit more baseball here in the next couple weeks. But I mean, it's looking like it's a crash course toward a rematch at the moment.
Yeah, so with all that being said, that wraps it up. And I think my stock meter for the Braves would probably be the highest at this moment. I'm probably around a 9.5, just like you. And that's that they will be in the World Series. That's not, they're going to be in the playoffs and they're going to win one or two series. No, I truly believe that the Braves are going to be in the World Series. Now, things can change between now and then, but like you think that it's almost mid-August and we're nearing that time where we have to start to talk about the playoffs, but there's still 45, 50 games left
Yeah.
in the season, believe it or not. I don't think the Braves are going to fall off. The only way I think that happens is if they have one or two major injuries. But yeah, I mean, right now, until proven otherwise, kind of like what I said with the Astros in the AL, I think the Braves are one of those teams in the NL that, like, regardless of where the game's being played, you're going to have to beat this team if you want to get to the World Series.
Yeah, and Atlanta's a tough place to play as well.
Right. So that's where things stand right now in baseball. We talked about probably 6 of 7 of the best teams in in baseball right now in terms of record. The only one that we didn't talk about was Tampa Bay. And then of course we added in the Cubs there, but for good reason. But I hope you guys enjoyed this content. Do you have any closing parting shot remarks?
No, not really. I gotta say though, I was so wrong with my preseason predictions. If I took a peek at that episode, and I think I had the Guardians in the playoffs. I think I had, oh my goodness, it was a, oh my goodness. But
Well,
anyways,
baseball fickle. Anyways, go check out our other content, whether that be our my Deep in the Heart of Longhorns episodes. Our NFL season previews are underway. We're going to have our college football preview starting soon, and all the other content that we're doing for you guys. Go check all that out. Make sure you like and subscribe. And just like the chances of the Padres and the Yankees being any good this season, we are gone. Peace out.
peace.